Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on the Migrating Mailboxes to Microsoft Office 365 training. My name is Gábor Szatmári. I work as a partner consultant in the Central and Eastern Europe region, and I'm an Office 365 specialist. In this presentation, I will walk through the technical details of the migration. I will pay special attention to the processes, including timing concerns. I want to cover three types of migration: the cutover, the IMAP, and the stage migration. Please note that, for example, hybrid migration is not covered in this presentation. And at the end, I will demonstrate a cutover migration for you. Just for the reference, here is a summary of the migration tools and options we have with Exchange Online. If you are interested in this big picture, I will suggest you the presentation Mail Migration Strategies. There is a tool which is called Exchange 2013 Deployment Assistant, what can be used as an official guide. This assistant will ask some questions regarding to the customer's environment and suggest a migration path for you. Also, it can create a step-by-step documentation what to do. It was demonstrated also in the previous presentation called Mailbox Migration Strategies. So let's start with the cutover migration. Cutover migration is the least complex from these three kinds of migration. You can see here a typical process flow for a cutover migration. We start from the left side. In the very first three steps, we are doing the preparation task. The actual migration, when we are synchronizing the data, it happens in the purple colored fourth step. And the rest is also not a too time-consuming sequence of some other tasks. And of course, I will explain more detailed all of these tasks in the next slides. You will start the migration with the preparation phase. This is the step number 1. So first, in the Office 365, you must add and verify your email domain, for example, contozo.com. Also, there is a requirement for a cutover migration process. You should not install directory synchronization tool. Cutover process is only for the customers with less than 1,000 users. We have experienced some important practices in the field, and let me highlight some of them. So the first one is right before the migration, you need to reconfigure the TTL value for your MX record. At some DNS provider, we have seen TTLs up to 1 week, which will surely delay your actual migration. So please reconfigure this value to 15 minutes or half an hour. The second one is you need to check the company credit card, if it's valid, if it's really a company credit card. And again, this can cause some delays in the migration if something is bad with that credit card. The third one is the firewall administration. If you need to do any kind of changes on the firewall, if there is any firewall at all, a company, you need to clarify who will administer the firewall and what processes should you maintain. The fourth one is again about the DNS provider. You need to figure out who can do the modifications on your DNS records, and of course you need to make sure that this guy is available even on the weekend. And also you need to check what is the service level agreement for your DNS provider. And what I have seen also in the configuration, when you add your actual domain record, you are requested to add the auto-discover record. However, you can do that later when you are ready to switch your auto-discover record. As the cutover migration process is using RPC over HTTPS, or called Outlook Anywhere, you need to install and use a public SSL certificate, which came from a public provider, a trusted public provider. If you don't have any yet, you may use a free trial certificate from a public provider, because this should be enough for this migration. And actually, after the migration, you don't need your on-premise Exchange server anymore, so you don't need your on-premise SSL certificate. So you can simply drop it. I suggest to create a dedicated administrator user, which will be used only for the migration. We must give him permissions, either full access permission to all of the mailboxes, or receive as permissions, or we just need to give him domain administrator permissions by putting him into the domain admins group. Next, you need to create the migration endpoint on the Office 365 portal. This will include your server's name, the migration administrator account, as well as the number of the simultaneous mailbox moves, which can limit the performance stress on your on-premise Exchange server. And let me also highlight some best practices. The very first one is the user communication. So please, in advance to the migration, inform the users what will going to happen. And also a very good idea to tell them about the Outlook web access address. So that means if they have any kind of trouble regarding to the Outlook when they try to log on to the Office 365, they can still fall back to use OVA. So all these kind of troubles will be not so urgent than without this kind of communication. The actual migration is started from the Exchange Online console. So first we will do an initial synchronization, which will synchronize up your on-premise mailbox data to the cloud. And actually, after that initial synchronization, we do incremental synchronizations in each day. And this will synchronize all the changes in your on-premise mailbox. So if a user received a new email, that will be synchronized. If a user sent an email, that will be synchronized. Or if this user deleted an email, this deletion will be also synchronized up to the cloud mailbox. What are the best practices from the field? Most of the users starting this migration phase in midweek, so for example on Tuesday, Wednesday. They can do that because the end users are not affected at all. They still have their working, normal, operational on-premise mailboxes, and they can still connect to these mailboxes and use them to receive and send emails. However, in the background, this migration process is running, and you can expect a maximum throughput of 5 to 10 GB per hour. Of course, this depends on your internet connection, on your network throughput, or also it depends from the actual performance of your on-premise server. And during this synchronization, feel free to review all the error logs presented on Exchange Online, so you can have a clear view what's going on in the system, and you can see if there are any items which cannot be migrated to the cloud. You can leave this incremental synchronization running for a couple of days. The actual switch is initiated by changing your MX record and auto discover record. As soon as you change your MX record, it will point to the Office 365, so all the incoming emails land in a cloud mailbox. And this is the right time to instruct the users or change their Outlook profiles centrally or by an administrator, to point and to connect to the cloud mailbox. And this will also mean that Outlook will rebuild the OST file by downloading all the emails from the cloud mailbox. The best practice from the field is to do this MX record change on Saturday, for example. So that would give enough time for the Outlook clients to download and rebuild the OST files. So we don't leave it for Monday, because that would stress our network very, very hard. So the system administrators can walk through the Outlook clients, they can reconfigure the MAPI profiles, and let Outlooks run and synchronize the data to the OST cache. In Office 2013, there is a new feature. You can set the cache interval for an OST file, so you don't need to download all the emails. You can decide and you can instruct Outlook to download and cache only the emails from the last month or from the last year. The rest of the emails are also available, also visible in Outlook, however, they are not cached in the OST file. And also, let me mention one more issue, that the incremental synchronization happens once in each 24 hours. So to make sure we cause the least outage for the actual users, the best practice is to change this MX record not too far before the incremental synchronization. So that would mean right when after the MX record was changed, we are performing an incremental synchronization, so the latest emails will be synchronized up to the cloud mailboxes. So after the MX record was changed, the users are using actually their Office 365 mailboxes to receive and send emails. You can still keep the incremental synchronization running, it's not a problem at all. Even you have the option to remove and restart the migration because this is a fairly intelligent process. If it finds any email what was already migrated to the cloud, it will not duplicate this email. So you can restart the migration and do it again if this is really necessary. But most of the users, most of the customers are removing this synchronization process on Tuesday, Wednesday, when they made sure all the users are using their new mailboxes. So this final task, the delete the batch task, this doesn't affect the actual users at all. Just you need to make sure there are no more users who are using their on-premise mailboxes, because if they send an email from this on-premise mailbox, then this will not be replicated after you finished the migration process, the cutover replication. And also you have a couple of tasks which can be performed on Sunday, for example, after the successful migration. So here again you need to communicate with your users. At least you need to distribute the new passwords for their cloud mailboxes. If you have any send as permissions used by the customers, then you need to configure these permissions, because the cutover migration won't reconfigure the send as permission on the new mailboxes. And of course, feel free to backup and then uninstall and retire your on-premise email infrastructure, because it doesn't used in the future. And please don't forget about the support personnel and support processes. Even you can tell them about the top issues, about the behavior of the new system. And of course, it's always a good idea to train the users itself, because we must give them productivity boost how to use the Office 365 infrastructure. Don't forget, they might have Exchange 2003, they might have Outlook 2003, and migrating to the newest version of Outlook is really a giant jump, 10 years ahead in the time to the modern era. So train the users, because we really want to make them productive. After the cutover migration, let me go through the differences versus the cutover migration. Let me describe the IMAP migration now. If you have a look on the general IMAP migration process, this is pretty much the same as it was with the cutover process. Let me highlight, however, the two steps in dark blue. So for an IMAP migration, we will create a migration batch or multiple migration batches. And this is actually what does the synchronization. So this is the long-running story. And since you are able to run multiple batches, they can schedule the migration to migrate some groups of users. And again, here in the one before the last step, which is in purple color, you need to change the MX records to point to Office 365, and this does the actual switch to the cloud infrastructure. So let's have a look on details of what are the differences. The first difference is in the preparation, because we are using this time the IMAP protocol. So your server must be able to accept the connection on port 143 or 993. 993 is for the secure IMAP. I highly suggest to use this port. Of course, here again you need to add and verify your email domain like contazo.com. And this time you need to manually create the actual users and the mailboxes in Office 365. You have different options. You can either create the users by using the portal, or you can bulk import the users by using CSV files, or even you can configure this thing to create these user accounts. As best practice, I always suggest to lower the TTL value of the MX record as previously. And also we can create a dedicated migration administrator user and give him permissions to being able to log on to the actual mailboxes. If this is not possible, because, for example, this IMAP server is hosted and you don't have the access to set up permissions on that server, no problem at all. Still, you have another option. You can collect all the user passwords and use them for the actual migration. As I mentioned, you can migrate your users in an IMAP migration in groups, in so-called batches. These batches are defined in CSV files. So CSV files contain the user name, the user logo name, and the user password, for example. Since you store passwords in these CSV files, you need to keep them really in secure locations. So keep BitLocker switched on your laptop, for example. And actually, you have a couple of limitations for these CSV files, but personally, I don't think they are really very strict. You should not enter more than 50,000 rows in one CSV files, or one CSV file cannot be bigger than 10 megabytes. However, feel free to create multiple CSV files, so even you can migrate a couple of 100,000 of users, no problem at all, just you need to use multiple CSV files. And here what you need to keep in mind, that still we are directing the emails to that server where the MX record is pointing to. So we don't have any redirection or any rules or whatever. Still, we are sending the emails to your on-premise server if you haven't changed the MX record to point to the cloud. The rest of the migration happens really the very same way as with the cutover migration. Again, we have incremental synchronizations once in each day. So basically, you can keep this IMAP migration process running. It will synchronize all the emails up to the cloud. Just the emails are landing first in the on-premise server, and these will be synchronized to the cloud when this incremental synchronization cycle is being activated. And last but not least, let's talk about the stage migration, which is actually a mix of the IMAP and the cutover migration. In the overall migration process for a stage migration, you can see that again we are starting with the preparation. In the purple colored box, you can see that we are creating a migration endpoint. And after that we have these dark blue boxes. And a dark blue box is marking the migration batch. And actually here again you have the possibility to create multiple batches, so you can move your users in groups to the cloud. So not everyone in one step, but in groups. The preparation step started with adding and verifying your email domain. This is the very same what we have seen in the IMAP and also in the cutover migration. This time, however, you must implement the directory synchronization tool. This directory synchronization tool will be responsible for creating and setting up the accounts in Office 365. This also causes that you must have an M or E plan for Office 365, or of course the standalone Exchange Online plan will be also suitable for the stage migration process. Again, we are using Outlook Anywhere or RPC over HTTPS, so you must configure this protocol on your on-premise Exchange server. Please note that here only Exchange Server 2003 and 2007 is supported. For Exchange Server 2010 and 2013, you must implement the hybrid scenario if you want to move your users in groups. There are also a couple of interesting points of the most important question what I was asked by a couple of partners: if you can deactivate the directory synchronization after the migration was done, and the answer is yes. So if you don't plan to use directory synchronization in the future, you can do that, just deactivate it, and so you can go on by managing your users totally in the cloud without any on-premise infrastructure. And similar to the IMAP migration, we define here the groups of the users by creating CSV files. These CSV files contain the name of the actual user accounts. Also highly recommended to create a dedicated migration administrator account, and again you need to give permission to that administrator account. And when you are ready, you can create the migration endpoint by entering the connection details to your server, including the migration administrator account name and the server name. The best practices for performing a stage migration is to move those groups, those users together who are normally working together. This is mainly because this so-called cross-premise sharing, when one mailbox who is already using the cloud mailbox is trying to share his mailbox or his calendar with one user who is on the on-premise server yet. So this is not available, this will not work. Of course, this FreeBusy information will work, it's not a problem, but really I would highly recommend to keep these workgroups together. Yeah, so keep in your mind if delegates or shared calendars are used, then you need to move these users together in one group. And here we do have also a limitation for a CSV file. It can contain maximum 1000 users. However, feel free to create multiple CSV files and multiple batches. So this is the opportunity when you need to migrate more than 1000 users. It's not a problem at all. When you create a migration batch, you are specifying the affected users by a CSV file. And here there is one interesting point. After you have started the batch, then immediately these users will be switched to the cloud. So it can be that the user is logging on to the mailbox, however the data is not replicated up to the cloud yet. So the actual user can see only an empty mailbox. So you must previously communicate to the users that this is a known problem, a known issue, and don't think that we lost or we removed all your older emails. We will replicate this content. Just please be patient, give us some time. Again, you can calculate with 5 to 10 gigabytes per hour, and all your mailbox data will be there. The best practice for one example scenario This is what I always suggest. Now you can group or you can move the groups of the people, each night one group. So you can start this migration batch, let's say after the work at 18 hours or 6 o'clock p.m. So during the night, the mailbox data can be synchronized up to the cloud, and of course, at the evening, you can reconfigure the affected users' Outlook profiles. So again, Outlook can rebuild the OST file, can download again the mailbox data, and in the morning, the users can start with the pre-filled Outlook profile, and they can start working. And on the next day, you can start the next batch, so you can move your users throughout the week as you wish and as you have time and capacity. And what is interesting here is that we don't have this incremental synchronization process. However, we don't need it, because when this simple coexistence is set up, then all the emails arrive still on the on-premise server, because the MX record is still pointing to the on-premise server. But for those users who are migrated to the cloud, for those users we are setting the target address property in the Active Directory, and this will send one copy from their inbound emails to their mailboxes. So actually, right when they are starting to use their cloud mailboxes, this is not an issue, because the inbound emails land also in the cloud mailbox. So this is also the reason why we need to implement the directory synchronization tool. And also here we have a best practice, because after the actual user is synchronized, and he's ready to use his cloud mailbox, the best practice is to convert the on-premise mailboxes to mail-enabled user objects. So you can remove these mailboxes and make sure the mail-enabled contact objects are forwarding the emails to the cloud. So this is the best practice. If we have finished with one specific migration batch, actually we just need to remove this migration batch. As I told you before, we don't have this incremental synchronization because we forward all the emails to the cloud mailbox. And here again, we need to keep in mind that the Outlook will rebuild the OST cache. Also, we need to keep in mind that the users will have new user accounts in the cloud. So if they are getting new passwords, you need to distribute them just for making sure they will log on to the cloud mailbox. And again, let me highlight that cross-premise sharing doesn't work, so please move all the workgroup members who are working together, who are sharing calendar items or whatever, together in one batch. But of course, you can create multiple batches, so you can move these workgroups one by one throughout days, throughout some weeks. This stage migration process is really pretty much scalable by the actual user number. When we have moved all the users to the cloud, then we are ready to end this simple coexistence between the on-premise and the cloud exchange. So again, we need to reconfigure our MX record to point to the cloud. So from this point, all the incoming emails will land in the cloud. And then also we are ready to uninstall the on-premise exchange server. If we haven't done this previously, then we also need to assign licenses for the Office 365 users, which are created by the directory synchronization during the migration process. If you don't need the directory synchronization tool for the future, you can deactivate it. So you can administer your Office 365 users in the Office 365 portal. Please keep in mind that this stage migration is not a real coexistence tool. If you really want to use coexistence in the future, so if you want to keep some of the mailboxes on-premise and some in the cloud, then the hybrid configuration is the one which is correct for you. However, the stage migration process can last even for a couple of months. So if your company is not able to migrate during one weekend, it's not a problem at all. Most probably then the stage migration will be the best for you, or a hybrid migration. So after the theoretical preparation, let me show you a demonstration for a cutover migration. Actually, this contains pretty much the necessary steps. I can demonstrate them, and of course, if you understand these steps and the user experience, then you will surely be able to perform a stage migration or an IMAP migration. I start the demonstration from the Office 365 portal. So I click on Domains, and you can see that I have here my actual default domain, and I have already added and verified my so-called vanity domain, which will used for email. In a live environment, you might run into a different situation, and let me demonstrate this one also very shortly. So you can see here I have added one more domain which is not completely set up yet. Let me show you where is the interesting point. So here in the actual wizard what flows through this domain registration process, I haven't completed step 3 yet. In step number 3, we are checking if your DNS records are correctly configured for this domain and for the purpose you are using this domain. So you can see that Exchange Online and Link Online are already selected. So I click on Next, and then I can see here the list of the DNS records to be created for these domains. And please note that here we are checking if the auto-discover record exists for your domain, and it should point to outlook.com. However, if you have a live environment, then you also have an auto-discover record which points currently onto your running Exchange environment. So if you press Done Check, then this will surely not finish without any errors, because your auto-discover record points to the wrong server. So you have here the opportunity to close this wizard and return later after you implemented the DNS changes, when you are ready to change your auto-discover record. So even if your domain is not fully configured and might show setup in progress, you will be able to create users who are using this particular domain name. The only interesting point that the verification of your domain should be done already. Next, I continue with the setup in the on-premise environment. In the very first step, I will create a dedicated migration user who will get permissions to read out the emails from the user's mailboxes. So I click on New Users in the Active Directory Users and Computers, and let's type in the name. Then I click on Next. I will give a password, and I don't want to change this password again. Click on Next, then click on Finish. After we have created the migration administrator user, we need to give permission to him. So I started here the Exchange shell. So I grab all the mailboxes and pipe it into a command which will add permission to the migration administrator user. The permission will be full access, and also I use all the inheritance types. So right now I press Enter, and I have full access on all the mailboxes in my organization. And please keep in mind that the permissions are cached on the Exchange server. So just for the demonstration, I will restart the Microsoft Exchange Information Store service, which actually causes all the Outlook clients dropped by the Exchange, but this is a test environment only. And I will restart this service, so the cache will be empty and the current mailbox permissions will surely apply and being actual in the cache. So let's start, and this will rebuild the cache on my Exchange server. The next step is creating the migration endpoint on the Office 365 portal. So I have logged on with the administrator users, and I go to the Exchange Management Console. On the Exchange Management Console, I need to choose the migration option. Here I have the option to define the migration endpoint by choosing the Migrate to Exchange Online option. So right now I have an Exchange Server 2010. However, I want to perform the cutover migration. So you can see this is fully supported by Exchange 2003 and later versions. So I can click on Next. I will enter now one of the email addresses I want to migrate. So for example, Holly. I will enter also the name of that migration administrator we have created. And I enter also the password of this migration administrator. And then after this, click on Next. Normally, this wizard should find your Exchange server using the auto discover record. If this is not successful, then you can manually add the actual name of your Exchange server. Here, I want to use the internal name of the Exchange server. Then I will use the external name of the server, which is published on your firewall. And then I will click on Next. In the next step, I can name this migration batch. For example, let's give here the name of migration 1. And then I can click on Next. And I don't want to start this migration right now, so I can select here manually start the batch later, and then I click on New. So my migration batch was created, and right now it's waiting for start. Please have a look on the right hand side, so you can see here a couple of detailed information. And while the migration is running, also the up-to-date information will be shown here. So right now I start this migration, and this will initiate the initial synchronization. So after I started this synchronization, I can click here on the details, and you can see that actually this synchronization is started to provision the user accounts. And if I want to have much more details, I can click here on download the report. And this will show me a text file which will contain the diagnostic information what's going on in the system. So the actual migration didn't started yet, so that's why it's empty. After a couple of minutes, you can see that the status of the first user was changed to syncing. So that means that the cloud is actually uploading the mailbox data to the cloud mailbox of Bob. So after a couple of hours, my initial synchronization was finished. So you can see here that all of my mailboxes are synchronized. Let's have a quick check what happened with the mailboxes. I'm looking for the mailbox details, and you can see that a lot of items are already synchronized, although some items are skipped. So I can click here on skipped item details to have a look at what happened. Unfortunately, I see here corrupt folder ACL, which doesn't seem really good. But then I can also download the report for the actual user. I open it in this notepad. And so I can go through the actual story, what happened during the migration. However, when I did that, I realized that actually all of the mailbox items were migrated, and the 4 corrupt items, they actually doesn't contain any data. So actually, I will really skip through this error message. And you can see that the mailboxes are synchronized already. So right now I'm just waiting for the incremental synchronization. And still users are not affected at all. They are still using their old mailboxes hosted on the on-premise Exchange server. However, in the cloud, their mailboxes are already present. They are filled up with emails. So it's my decision when to switch to the online environment. Okay, so we have jumped in the time, advanced by 2-3 days. So right now the incremental synchronization is going on, and let me show you how it looks like. So I can click on the details, and you can see that the actual mailboxes are synchronized. And let me show you the details of the synchronization process for Hali's mailbox. And if I scroll down, I can see in the very last line that right now we are suspending the job and we are in the incremental synchronization status. And today is the 5th of May. And if you scroll up, you can see the very same status, the suspend status from the 4th of May in the night. And we are continuing the actual incremental synchronization process at the next day in the very same time point. So this is where you can see how the incremental synchronization is going on. The cutover migration created the users in Office 365. However, we haven't assigned licenses for these users yet. So let's do this one right now. I will select the users who are replicated from the on-premise environment and click on Edit here. I will skip here the first page. Then on the second page, I set the user location to Hungary. And in the third page, I can assign the licenses. So let's say replace, and I will give E3 plan licenses for all of my users. So you can see that the licenses are assigned to the users. I click here on Finish. Did you notice that passwords are not shown? So to grab the passwords for the newly created users, you need to go into your mailbox and search for the message which is telling the migration is finished. And there you can download the success report. This will contain a CSV file with the passwords, so these can be distributed among the users. The next task is to do the switchover by changing the MX record for our domain. The best practice is to do this on Saturday, so the overall work is not affected. If you have a DNS company which allows you to change the MX record, then you will meet some kind of a web interface where you can edit the records, like this one on the screenshot. If not, then you need to request the change in email or on phone. If you have split DNS implemented, then please don't forget to update the records on your internal DNS servers too. Let me find the instructions for the DNS records. So I select here my email domain, click on View DNS Settings. Then click here on View DNS Records. And here are the records that need to be set for Exchange Online. After you change the DNS records, you need to wait until the changes are propagated. In my example, I set the TTL value to half an hour, so I need to wait at least half an hour until all the emails are redirected to the cloud. When we are back from our coffee break and the DNS records are up to date, then we have also one more task. You can see that my migration process, while it's running the incremental synchronization, it was automatically suspended, and I must do one more synchronization by pressing this play button, and this will enforce a synchronization, so all the emails will be up to date in the cloud mailboxes. So you can see that right now the status was changed to syncing. And this is the right time to reconfigure the Outlook clients. So I go to the control panel and search for Mail and start the Mail application. This application can manage the MAPI profiles. If I click here on Show Profiles, you can see that Holly has already one MAPI profile. But right now we will add a new profile for her. So I will click here on the Add button. The profile name will be New, and fill out the data of Holly. And let me add here a remark regarding to the passwords. Temporary passwords should be changed at the first logon. So the password you enter here should not be a temporary password. So I would create a password which will be used throughout the weekend by the desktop administrator staff, and do a password reset on Sunday evening, and then distribute these new passwords to the end users. So let's press next here. So we are trying to log on to the Exchange. And we need to type the password again. And after a couple of seconds, the logon was successful, so we can click on Finish. So you can see the new profile was created, and you can set it to default, press OK, and next time when you start Outlook, this new profile will be populated. One more time, and I type in the password and click on Remember. And you can see that Outlook is setting up this profile, and just skip this one, and downloading the emails from the cloud. This download will surely take a while, so the system administrator can leave Outlook running, move on to the next desktop workstation, configure it one by one basically, and then during the weekend the Outlooks can download the mailbox content, so there will be no stress on Monday morning when the users start to work. And let's do a quick check here. So this is a high fidelity migration, so all my mailbox objects were migrated, including the emails and, for example, the calendar entries. So you can see all my calendar entries are migrated. So after this demonstration, the key takeaway is that we have some kind of preparation phase, we have the migration phase, and also we have the finalize phase in each of these migration types. During the preparation, keep in mind you need to do some activities on the Office 365 portal, and also you need to configure your on-premise system and prepare it for the migration. In the migration phase, we have multiple choices, and we have the cutover migration, which will migrate all the users in one step during one weekend, for example. Or we can use IMAP or stage migration to use the actual users in groups. And in the final phase, we need to change the MX record and the auto-discover record, and optionally we can uninstall and decommission the on-premise messaging or the on-premise infrastructure. I hope you enjoyed the show, and feel free to contact us on the below addresses, like on askpts@microsoft.com. If you are interested in details, then go to the website outlook.com and search for these articles like IMAP migrations or cutover exchange migrations, because you can find there step-by-step instructions and best practices and very, very detailed technical information. So thank you for attending on this presentation, and see you on other presentations created by Partner Services. Goodbye.